What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode number 265 of Truth Telling with Elizabeth and D'Alto. Oh, it would be an amazing thing if I could say my name right. To Truth Telling with Elizabeth D'Alto. We are not even going to edit that out. We're going to leave that in. I'm recording this on Friday, July 27th. It is the full moon, the blood moon, the lunar eclipse, all kinds of interesting things going on this week. It's Mercury retrograde and, so many of these interesting things that I share with you all on the podcast. I don't let my life revolve around or be dictated by any of them, but I certainly am open to the influence and the consideration of, what's going on in the cosmos, what's influencing us, what might be factoring in to some of the everyday chaos, instability, and wild, weird, and interestingness of life. So that's what's going on over here. And I really wanted to bring back the Ask Elizabeth segment to the show. This is something that we haven't done since 2015. I actually did it for a couple months in the summer of 2015, and then I stopped. But I was inspired to do it as a monthly segment and to pick a theme. So instead of having it just be random miscellaneous questions, we would do a theme. And so I posted on social media and I asked people, what questions do they have about relationships? It could be romantic relationships, coworkers, friends, family, whatever, communication. So I have some really juicy questions today. Tons of questions got submitted. I'm going to get through as many as I can in about 45 minutes to an hour. And I really look forward, as some of you already know, the best place to connect with me is on Instagram. My username is @ElizabethD'Alto. You can comment on my posts. You can send me DMs. I respond to most comments and most DMs. Of course, don't ask me for free advice because that is not something that I do in the DMs on Instagram. But if you want to share what you thought, your reflections and things like that, I always love to hear those things from you. And if you haven't yet checked out the Patreon, head on over to patreon.com/Elizabeth Untamed. And so Patreon is patreon.com/Elizabeth Untamed. And that's where I do a little more intimate content. I do 2 extra podcast episodes a month, similar to Sunday sermons, which we were doing for a while, where I just riff. Those are not Q&As. I'll just riff on something that's up, something I'm noticing, curiosities, things that are coming up in the community. And as well, I do 2 Wild Soul movement sessions. I send videos twice a month, among a couple other things, some private posts. The Patreon I love is really just a place for me to share more intimate details and musings and things that are on my mind and on my heart that I'm exploring that I just don't want to post on public social media, but I know that many of you would enjoy and also get value out of. So head on over and check that out if you want to. But let's dive into today's Ask Me Anything. So I'm going to start out with the questions that people had submitted on my Instagram stories. So the first question was about romantic relationships, and someone asked, with new ones, how do you be vulnerable without oversharing? And this is a really great question because this is actually something that I've been working on myself as I've been dating over the last few months because, everyone's different. Everyone is at a different place with their own vulnerability, with their emotional intelligence, and really with their capacity for truth. And so I love, in terms of vulnerability, something I always come back to is something that Brené Brown teaches, which is that people have to earn the right to your deepest truth. So where I find this conflicting in dating is I want to be my truest, fullest self. I don't want to waste time with people who might not be interested in the full me, but there's also, it's kind of inappropriate to blast people with all of you on a first date, and I've been there. I've been well, if they can't handle it, then they're not the one. And nah, sometimes we need to ease in. Sometimes we need to warm up to people. And so I think, on a first date, it makes sense to, do some general fact finding, but also get a little deeper. Bring up, ask someone what they're passionate about so you could talk about what you're passionate about. But really trust yourself. It's important to be present in your body and really feeling into, is this right or appropriate to share right now? Is it something I want to hang back on? And it's not I was about to say hold back and I just corrected myself. It's not about holding back, but it's about pacing yourself. And so I'm not telling anyone, and I would never suggest that someone tone themselves down, but we do need to warm up with people. I have had some experiences where it just like crashed and burned because it was just too much too soon. Whether that was too much of anything, too much sharing, too much intimacy, too much sex, too much talking about the past, too much thinking about the future, So I think there's a sweet spot that you can really trust yourself around. And a great way to navigate it is to ask yourself, what do I want? What am I wanting to share right now? And why do I want to share it? What's my intention here? What's the intended outcome? And go from there. And so I really, even just this morning, I was typing out a message. I was thinking I was going to share something with a man I'm seeing. He had asked me something the other night, and I gave him a partial answer. I just didn't feel like going into the deep thing because I didn't feel like explaining myself. And so that's another part of it, right? Like, you have to notice, do I feel comfortable? Do I feel safe here? And also, do I feel like putting in this effort right now? So there's a couple different things to feel into and to consider. Like, there aren't hard and fast rules. You really have to like be in your body. But I think the intention, like, why am I sharing this? What do I hope to gain from sharing this? Like, am I opening up because I want them to open up? Does this feel like an important thing for this person to know about me if we're going to continue to move forward? And I'm reading this book called Deeper Dating right now by Ken Page, who I hope to get on the podcast soon. Some of you might have seen me posting about it on social media. And, in the book, he included a story of a woman who like really knew she was ready to like settle down and have kids, or at least just have kids and do it on her own. And so she met someone she really liked. And on the third date, she was like, hey, listen, I just want to be really clear. I want kids. I want to get married. I want to have kids. I want to have a family. And the guy's response was, great. Where do I sign up? And if someone's response is different than that, then maybe you have something to consider whether or not this is something that you want to move forward with. So probably I feel like that is a good groove, right? Like, first and second date are kind of like these get to know yous. Maybe you have some cool phone calls and, you start to feel comfortable, like you want to open up. But then probably around the third or fourth date is a really good time to decide these things that feel really important to share, to see how someone's going to be able to react or respond. It's not like dropping a bomb on somebody, but it's like, if this is really deep, really important to me, might as well find this out early than holding back. And so what I think also is a line between vulnerability and oversharing is not getting into like the drama and the story, like the details, like the reliving of something, and like, we don't need to bring old pain into new situations. We don't need to paint ourselves as the victim. We don't need people to feel bad for us or anything like that. And so just be really clear on why you're sharing and what are your intentions. So that's my riff on that. Second question I have here is how to deal with obsession and romanticism with dealing with reality in the beginning. And this is funny because a couple months ago, I feel like I really crashed and burned on a situation similar to this because I met someone that really was checking off some really important boxes to me. And we were having so much fun, and we were like just connecting in ways that I hadn't connected with a man in a really long time. And so I went right into the romanticizing. And if anyone's not clear on what that means, it's like, overinflating and, really making something seem way better than it actually is. And so I was just talking to a friend about it this morning, and one of the things that she said, which I loved, was that she allows herself to romanticize, like write it all out, everything she wants, everything she thinks, everything she could see maybe with this person, but then make a separate journal entry that is, and what do I actually know to be real right now? Because when we're romanticizing, one of the things that we're doing is we're giving unearned benefits of the doubt. We're filling in facts that we don't have. We're making assumptions. We're setting expectations. And so one of the really cool things, often one of the gifts of romanticizing, is it's showing you perhaps some really true and some really deep desires, some things that you really long for, some things that you really yearn for. And that's a beautiful thing. Like even with one of the men I was seeing, he had so many things that I really wanted and a couple of things that were like real deal breakers for me. But I would notice whenever I would feel upset that like I just knew he couldn't like go to this place or give me this thing or be this kind of person, instead of lamenting that I couldn't get what I wanted from this man, I would instead like amplify the desire that was real within me and, just enjoy the connection with this man and still treat it as like a great opportunity to like practice for what I want in the future, but hold that longing and that desire for the thing that wasn't present there, but knowing how important something was to me by the intensity of the longing. And so the person who asked this question used the word obsession. And so if you're obsessing over something, my real advice is to, instead of making it about the person, make it about the quality, and also look at where in you might be able to like fill that in a little bit so that, or where you can fill it in elsewhere in other relationships in your life, maybe, in your friendships or maybe in activities where you can get a need met. Like if we're going as far as to feel like obsessed with something, there's probably a need that really needs to be met that's really going unaddressed. So that's something to look at as well. So that's a good question. Thank you. Someone said, 2 months into a relationship and nervous he's emotionally controlling. Do I leave this early? And I had followed up with this person on Instagram to ask for some examples of like what this person does. And the examples that she was giving were she shares her feelings with this person and he kind of denies or dismisses her feelings and kind of tells her that something will be so great or maybe that she should like this. And so to me, that's an enormous red flag. If someone is either dismissing, invalidating, or like mansplaining on top of your feelings when you're expressing very true, important things to you, to me, that is a red flag. To me, that's a little bit, it could be some symptoms of someone who's narcissistic, not necessarily, doesn't actually have to be. It might just be someone who's not super considerate. It might be someone who's unavailable and wants things to be their own way. Maybe this is a very controlling person. But to me, it's really important, if it's going to be a healthy love and a healthy relationship, that someone is unconditionally supporting. Like if I'm expressing a desire, one of the examples she had given was he invited her to go to an event and she said she didn't want to go and he got her a ticket anyway. So if I'm explicitly telling you I don't want something and then you're coercing me into doing it, like coercion is never really a good sign. And so you might want to address it before you leave, but I wouldn't give this kind of behavior that much longer to fix itself because, it's much easier to start relationships than it is to leave relationships. And so my opinion on this is that it's a huge red flag and you really have to check in with yourself, check in with your body. And again, one of the reasons why I really have been recommending that book by Ken Page is because he talks about the difference between attractions of inspiration and attractions of deprivation. And, some people are both. But the thing is, if someone is more deprivation than they are inspiration, you got to go. And if it's like equal, there's always going to be a tension. There's always going to be a tug. And there's always going to be like this self-compromise happening. And I'm not a really big fan of that either. So I'm really interested, and what I want for everyone is to have relationships that are inspiring, that are expansive, that are supportive for you, where you can bring your full self and you can feel like you're seen and heard and met. Even if someone doesn't understand or doesn't relate or has a different opinion, they should really still be able to respect and honor yours without trying to get you to see things or do things their way. The next person asked, what's the perfect comeback for the loaded, lingering phrase, maybe you're just too picky? She said, I'm happily single. And I also had followed up with her to ask if the people who were saying that to her are people she's going on dates with or like friends and family. And she responded that it was friends and family. And so this is interesting to me because sometimes when people say things like this, they're saying it because like they love you, they care about you, and they support you. But it's also really reflecting their own beliefs and their own experience. So sometimes people are saying these things to validate their own experience. Like if someone feels like they have settled in their own relationship or their own marriage, they might be saying to you, like, well, maybe you're just being too picky because they were not picky enough, right? So in terms of a comeback, this is so simple. I would just say, maybe, and that's it, and move on. So it does not have to be a conversation, because I'm not interested in debating. I'm not interested in diving in. Clearly these people are coming from a more limited place than you are. So I don't see the need to engage with it. I would just go, maybe, and then change the subject. Move on. Okay. Someone said, if my boyfriend is transferred for work and I go with him, am I ignoring my path? And without knowing this person personally, I really have to say I don't know. Because, if this person is someone that you really care about and you feel like they're part of your path, then going with him, it might be a sacrifice, but maybe it is an aligned choice. And so, everything I do in my work and in Wild Soul Movement, I'm always inviting women to come back to their bodies. So to, put a hand on your heart, take some deep breaths and really imagine and really feel into, being with him wherever he's going. How does that feel to you in your body when you feel into it? Does it feel expansive, calming, like a relief, exciting? I mean, is there some kind of compelling or softening feeling about it? Like, ultimately, does it feel good? Does it feel like a yes? Or do you feel constricted, tightening? Does it feel like a no? Do you get pain in your body or anything that really would indicate a no? So I would suggest really feeling into this, or maybe giving yourself an opportunity to try it out. Have you visited the place? Like, can you go with him and see if you like the place? Because when we make big choices like this for other people, of course, it's easier to end up resentful if it isn't aligned for you. So there's nothing that says your path can't intersect with his path, or that this move wouldn't be able to serve you as well. But of course, there's all these other factors. How does it affect your other relationships with your friends and your family who you might be close to right now? How does it affect your work and your career? So, certainly there's many factors, but ultimately my practice and what I teach my women and my students and my clients is that feel it out, feel into it. Your body is super wise. Your heart is super wise. So this isn't so much of a pros and cons list situation. This is a really feel into it and see how it feels, and you'll know the answer. Someone just wrote, she didn't even ask a question. She just wrote, unequal sex drives, exclamation, exclamation. I've had this in the direction of being the one with more of a sex drive. And so I don't know if this person was asking if hers is lower or higher. But what I have found, and also in talking to other people, is when it comes to sex, because sex is such a highly charged topic in our culture, and there is so much shame around it, it's really important. You might want to try my Courageous Conversation framework, which you can get by going to untameyourself.com/conversation. It's really important to bring this up in a delicate way that will not be emasculating for your partner if your partner's a man, and won't just be shaming or blaming if your partner is a woman. And essentially, we just don't want to make anyone feel bad that we want something more than they do. And often when it comes to sex, especially a sex drive thing, we take it personally, we make it about us, and we think it's about us. But really, there's so many factors that could factor in. Depending on the phase or the cycle where someone is in their life, they might literally just have so much going on in other places, especially if they're doing a lot of creative output. Because the energetic center in our bodies where creative energy is also where our sex energy is, because sexual energy is obviously creative energy. So if your partner or you are in a place where you're doing a lot of creative output elsewhere, there really might not be that much energy left over for sex. It might be about a time of day. It might be about other emotional things that are going on. So I really suggest using the Courageous Conversation framework and bringing it up. Depending on who it is, maybe you want to have more of a self-pleasuring or masturbation practice. Maybe you treat that as a cultivation, meditation kind of situation. But often, people are just not really communicating well around sex because they feel ashamed or they feel embarrassed about what they need or about what they want. So I also highly recommend Alison Armstrong's book, The Queen's Code. And as well, I did an interview a while back with Marsha Baczynski, where we talked about asking for what you want and doing it in really fun, healthy, playful, but also effective ways. So you might want to check out that interview. We'll put it in the show notes. This is episode number 265. So you can get the show notes at untameyourself.com/TT-265. That's untameyourself.com/T as in truth, T as in telling -265. And we'll put a link to that interview with Marsha, and we'll put a link to her website as well. So it might just be a matter of figuring out a really great way to bring it up that doesn't shame anyone or make anyone feel insufficient or inadequate. Someone asked, and this is a really great question, what has made the biggest impact or change on your relationship with yourself? And my answer is for sure my Wild Soul Movement practice. It's a practice, obviously, that I teach and facilitate for others. Like I said, I post 2 videos a month over on the Patreon. I have a virtual program that'll be coming back in 2019. I host weekend workshops. I host retreats. But it's all centered around a sensual movement practice, which is about getting out of the head and into the body. So using mantras and moving my body in a nonlinear way that feels very feminine. That also includes, shaking things out of the body that we don't need, patting the body, connecting our hands, a lot of like self-touch and self-massage, and giving yourself affection, and just like allowing yourself to move for the sake of movement, to be really grounded and to be really present and to feel into what is there, and really appreciate the body for much more than what it looks like. That, without a doubt, has been the thing for me that's had the biggest impact on my relationship with myself, because now I trust myself. I trust my body. I trust my heart. Something that I've really been exploring this year is the difference between the wisdom of the body and the wisdom of the heart. And so exploring more into that heart space and really believing that the highest intelligence I have is the wisdom in my heart. That has been absolutely life-altering. So, great question. Someone said polarity. So much stuff out there is about leaning back, being a bit passive and sweet, like the yin to yang. But what about full-on Shakti? I guess yin versus Shakti, And I don't love the polarity conversation in context of relationship. There are people who teach this. David Data is someone who comes to the top of mind. And, in my experience, this can get people largely in their heads, feeling like they should be doing things that they aren't, or shaming themselves that they should be more of this or more of that. I've also had a partner who studied that stuff and really used it, kind of weaponized it against me to shame me for not being like the feminine kind of woman that he wanted, when really like the way he was behaving and being critical and, just downright mean to me sometimes did not make me want to be this like soft, feminine, receptive being with him. I often felt like I was on the defensive, and I was reacting to him, and I was hurt. I was hurt a lot of the time. And so it wasn't super possible for me to be that like soft feminine when I was often like really hurt, and also really just like on guard for when the next like emotional hijack might come, like when he got into a bad mood or something. And so, it's interesting stuff to explore and try out, but I'm really not a huge fan. So I'm not going to pass a huge opinion like I'm an expert or anything like that. To me, what feels more important and what feels more aligned is to just be in my fullest expression of myself and stay connected to my heart and be super loving and compassionate and open to my partner. And if I want to be fully accepted and supported, I need to also provide that. I need to have the capacity to return that. And so when there's the common ground of like wanting the best for each other, then, yin yang, full Shakti or not, like, I don't know that matters when we're just like deeply loving and working towards healthy love and being honest and like talking about things when we need to talk about them, asking for our needs to be met, being in our gifts, honoring the other person's gifts. Someone else asked, how do you know when it's time to let go of a relationship? This is hard, and I've done podcasts on this actually. It's hard because sometimes we become more attached to the situation than we actually are in love with a person. Or we feel like we've put in so much time, it would be a waste to end it. Like, we need to keep going. And so I remember when this was my experience with my last relationship, I was waffling. I was going back and forth in that relationship for like half the duration of it. And I remember asking this to one of my mentors, and she said, like, you'll know. And I did. I knew when it was time. It was just like unbearable. There were things that like the straws that broke the camel's back. And so some of the markers are truly if you feel unsafe, unseen, unloved, like you really can't be yourself. If you feel like the relationship is constantly centering around the other person and not like equally or in a reciprocal way that feels good for you. But like the point of relationships is to get to like practice and grow in love and nourish love and like grow together and be together and like have a support system and be a support system. And so relationships are challenging, but it shouldn't be so freaking hard all the time that you're drained. Ultimately, if the relationship isn't a place where you feel at home and where you feel like you could be even more of yourself than you can in other places, it's that could be a really good indicator that it's time to go. So good question. And I mean, we could go so much deeper with that question, but that's a great place. That's a great place for now. So let's go over to some of the other questions I received. One was, how did you create the relationship with your deepest, most sensual, and intimate sexual self? And so, earlier I talked about the Wild Soul Movement practice, but also I really believe in the power of self-pleasuring and like getting to know your own, sacred sexuality. What do you like? Like, this involves touching yourself, whether you want to use your hands or use toys or, make it a meditation. I love, love, love. What I highly recommend for this actually is to check out my friend Betsy Blankenbaker's book, Autobiography of an Orgasm. And then she also has some anthologies, Autobiography of Our Orgasms, which are stories from other women. And then the book beyond that, which is called Beyond O. And it's about exploration in and with yourself, but then also exploration, with partners. And of course, like with safe partners. Something I've come to learn about myself is that I can't do casual sex. I'm not into just like one and done. I need an emotional connection to fully open up. And as well, I realized it's not just an emotional connection, but like I need to really like respect someone. A physical attraction, in my 20s, I could get away with the physical attraction. But now that I'm much more connected to my own body and my own heart and my own integrity, I need a person to be like a worthy lover to explore. And again, I'm going to refer you back to that interview with Marsha Baczynski, because when it comes to being with a partner, it's about like asking for what you want and like being receptive, allowing yourself to feel pleasure, unpacking, doing any unpacking you need around receptivity and feeling pleasure and also expressing. And so I had been in a number of serious relationships from my mid-20s to my early 30s. And so I had the experience of having, just the only way to say it is like having a lot of sex with people who I trusted and felt safe with, in partnership. I found within partnership a safe place to explore that. And then obviously within myself and just like getting to know what I like. Following my cycle was also really helpful for this, because the sex drive will be different at different phases of your cycle. If you're a person who menstruates, your uterus, not your uterus, I think your cervix moves. So like what feels good to you during one part of your cycle might not feel good to you in other parts of your cycle. And then also depending on what's going on. So I don't fake anything. I haven't faked an orgasm, I don't know, in like a decade. And, I ask for what I want. I speak up. Like if someone's doing something I don't like, I will gently guide them to do something that feels better. And then, and for me personally, that has to do with that I don't feel like my sexuality, I don't owe anyone anything. And so if something feels off, if something doesn't feel good, I'm not going to continue doing it. And that's whether I'm exploring with myself or I'm exploring with somebody else. And so that's my answer for now. Really good question. Okay, someone said healthy conflict, how to have arguments with your partner without being like your parents who only screamed or ignored each other. I love this question, and I'm also going to refer you to the Courageous Conversation framework. Listen, it's okay to disagree with people. It's healthy to disagree with people, but it's about, do you want to be right or do you want to get along? Do you want to be right or do you want to be free? Do you want to be right or do you want to come to a better understanding where the person can see you better and maybe understand you better and you can see them better and maybe understand them better? Or if you don't completely fully understand each other, maybe it's that you could just see where someone is coming from. Someone I'm spending time with right now, something I really actually appreciate about him is that we can have these really healthy debates. And he's really open to considering things, and so am I. But I'm not going to change my mind to acquiesce or just, to agree with him. I'll consider, and then we can respectfully disagree. So it's a beautiful thing for healthy conflict to be willing to respectfully disagree and see where do you maybe need a boundary, or do you need an agreement, or do you need to manage your own expectations, or where is maybe something a deal breaker that you go, okay, we obviously, this isn't something we're ever going to agree upon, so let's have this not be something that we talk about anymore. So a lot of this will also come around to the kinds of boundaries. If there's conflict, if there's conflict that you can't resolve, then you're probably going to need some boundaries, or to, end a relationship or change the relationship. But it's really important. And one of the reasons why I like the Courageous Conversation framework is because before you go into a conversation with someone else, there's some really potent questions to answer for yourself so that you could, before you go into it, be really clear on what are your outcomes? What do you want to get out of it? Why is there a conflict? What are you hoping to accomplish? And you can share that with a person so that no one ever feels attacked, blamed, shamed, and you can actually have a productive, useful conversation. Somebody asked, what are words one might use to hold someone accountable for narcissistic abuse? And my response to this person was, initial thoughts, we both know this is pointless. And, if someone has mental health issues, if they have any kind of personality disorder, if they're super narcissistic, or if they're just mean or nasty or emotionally abusive, fairly often people like that are not going to be accountable. And so trying to find the words to hold them accountable is just going to be a waste of your time, as well as probably really taxing on your heart and on your energy, because you're wanting something, you're wanting a resolution or closure or acknowledgement that you're probably not going to get. So my answer here is actually not to be so worried about the words, but to do whatever healing or grieving or processing that you need to do around that. This thing might go unresolved forever. And how can you move on without resolution? Somebody asked a question about a work relationship, how to stop over-functioning around colleagues who frequently make mistakes and fail to plan ahead. So I had an experience with my team. I don't remember if it was earlier this year in 2018 or maybe towards the end of 2017, where one of our team members was kind of making more mistakes than usual. People are human. They're going to make mistakes here and there. But she was pretty consistently making mistakes and dropping balls. And I was like, what's going on here? And one of the things we did was everyone on my team took the Colby Index, which is a really cool tool for productivity that helps people to see how they are productive. And when you know how you're productive and when you know how the people around you are productive, people can create systems for themselves, or you can create systems amongst each other to get things done in ways that are more aligned with how you actually function and get things done. And so I don't know if people in your work environment would be willing to do that, to take that assessment, but it changed everything for us. So for that person on my team, what had happened was her role had changed quite a bit, and I'd given her quite a lot to do, and she was basically learning as she went, trial by fire, and so she just had gotten disorganized. the only time she made mistakes is when she was disorganized. And so she needed systems, but she didn't just need systems. She needed to actually create her own systems that worked for her. I could create systems for her, but because I created them, my biases were built in. And so this person realized she just needed to create her own system. And like literally within 2 days, she had her system set up. She was good to go. And like, we've never had that issue since. So, maybe it's a matter of, again, I would always use the courageous conversation framework, but then maybe suggest that, the people on your team, maybe you bring it to your boss and be like, hey, can we check out this tool? So maybe we can see how we could better work together. Because one thing that is really helpful, often if people are making mistakes or dropping the ball, we get pissed and we get irritated because we're making it like a personal thing instead of going, this is someone who's just trying to do something that they're not equipped to do. And then we can get more solutions oriented around how can we create a system, or how could we do something that would help it flow better to completion? Okay, someone asked, how do you know it's time to call it quits in friendship? This is a really good question, and this is something that I have a lot of experience navigating in the last few years. After my last relationship ended, we had a lot of mutual friends, and for me, because I really needed to go no contact with this person, I realized that there were just going to be some people I was going to have to let go of because it felt really misaligned to me to stay in relationship with people who were still in any kind of relationship with my ex. And so I give that example, but all of that is to say is friendships are meant to be supportive, loving, nourishing, fun. They should be value adds in your life, not draining. And so I think when it's time to call it quits, first of all, there's that quote, people come into your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. Sometimes it's just a season or a phase. And maybe it's not about calling it quits, but about taking a pause. And, there's 2 ways to do it. I remember with one friend in particular, I was really upset because we had been really close. And he clearly wasn't interested in making the effort with me. And so I just let it fizzle out because it didn't feel like I needed to have an exit interview. It didn't feel like I needed to say anything. I could just let it go and bless it and grieve and move on. And I had done that for a couple of months, and then this person circled back and they were like, hey, I know I haven't been around. I'm so sorry. And he came over and we had a dinner. But it was really easy to see that that friendship, the way it had been, was going to be over. So it's not always about calling it quits, but sometimes it's just about realizing that a relationship, maybe that once was super close, is going to shift to just not be as close. Maybe you're growing in a way that they aren't, and you just can't relate as much as you used to. So if there's anything worth salvaging, my advice, and I've done this a lot within my family relationships too, is, let the friendship revolve around the things that do work, that are fun, that are nourishing, that are enjoyable, the places where you do connect, and just don't focus on, don't worry about the things where you don't. So I really do think that it could be healthy to selectively enjoy people and have, different friends that work for different environments, experiences, or whatever. But when it's time to call it quits, I believe truly is when you have had an issue with someone and it's recurring and they've really demonstrated, not through their words, but through their actions, that they're really not going to do anything differently. That's when I think it's really time to go. Okay. So those are all of those questions. And there was one more. Let me find this real quick. Where was it? Okay. How do you navigate a relationship with a friend you are concerned about, think drinking or substance abuse problem, who has now crossed boundaries because of it and hurt you and others? And so, addiction is something that I've been wanting to have more people on the podcast to talk about. I'm not an expert here, but I did have this experience with a former partner who was doing a lot of drugs, and not hard drugs, but it was more LSD, mushrooms, things like that. They were calling it microdosing, but I saw it as a lot of escapism, and it was really hard to be around, and I feel created a lot of volatility within that person and in the relationship, and they would cross boundaries, and they did hurt me, and we don't ever want to just leave people out on their own. But I think when you've addressed something, kind of similar to the last thing, when you've addressed something with someone so many times and they are still doing the same thing or repeating the same patterns, habits, or behaviors, then at what point do you not take the abuse anymore? You know, it makes sense to not. You can try to get them help, but something I certainly have heard is that, you know, when people are in addiction, they can't be helped until they want to help themselves. So maybe it's about having an intervention. Maybe it's about contacting and connecting with their family or people who might have more or different influence over them. You know, we can have these conversations, but, you know, sometimes when people are in these places, we have to either let them go, which is really painful, address it, or decide how much of any detrimental behavior that comes along with their situation we're willing to take. So I'm not going to go too deep into that one because I'm certainly no expert in dealing with people with addiction, but I'm going to find some people to have on the podcast about that because that's a really, really great question. But I think what's always super important is, and especially when addiction is at play, if you have any kind of codependency in your past or in your system and in your present, you got to be really, really, really careful because addicts and codependents go together like peas and carrots. And you could really find yourself carrying a lot of stuff that is not your stuff, that is really not mentally, emotionally, energetically, in some cases even physically healthy for you. And these are hard choices to make. We obviously don't want to abandon people when they need love and when they need us. But if they are completely unwilling to help themselves, there's really not much that we can do to help them during that time. So we actually got through all the questions. So thank you all so, so much. Again, find me on Instagram, find me on Facebook. Of course, I'll be posting when this episode is live. Let me know what you think. Let me know what helped. Obviously, of course, share your own experiences or resources if you have them too. Thank you so much for the Q&A. Of course, send me a note. Let me know. Do you want more of these Q&As? What themes would you want to see me go all in on in the coming months? So again, this was episode number 265. The show notes will be at untameyourself.com/TT-265. And we will be back next week with a brand new interview with my dear friend, Rebecca Barucki. So stay tuned for that in episode number 266.
Well, my origin story is the first time I organized, it was as a gangbanger. I was the first white girl in the Rollin' 30 Crips, which is a black gang in, throughout LA, mostly West Coast. Have you heard about the Crips and the Bloods?
Yep.
So when I was 16, the boy I fell in love with was a co-founder of the Crips. And that's where I did my first organizing. And the organizing was around ensuring that my friends could eat. And it was a simple thing. In Denver, Colorado at the time, it's when crack cocaine hit the streets. And so what was happening is that there was a community that was addicted to drugs, and the people that were impacted were my friends. And the only access we had as teenagers was, okay, so my friend doesn't have food. How are we going to get food? We don't have any money. So that was my first organizing. And then shortly after that was around graffiti and how do we organize a crew to put messages on the wall that says we are here. And we're not going to be quiet. And then I went into Universal Zulu Nation, which is a hip hop organization, the longest standing hip hop organization that exists. And I was rocking as a Zulu queen. And that was about organizing young people to really get in touch with their power through the mission of hip hop culture, which is to uplift and inspire.